Morning, everyone. That's right. If email marketing is dead, it's because you killed it. So here I am standing on stage accusing you and making friends immediately. But what I really want to start off talking about is the great game of baseball. And over the course of many years in the storied history of the MLB, we have lots of great stories. We can talk about great plays that were made. We can talk about social changes that have been made through the game. But very infrequently do we actually talk about the history of the baseball itself. So what was happening back in the late 19th century is that all the teams could kind of create their own baseball. And there were general guidelines on how a baseball was made. However, there was no consistency across team to team how they made a ball. So there were two types of balls, one called a dead ball and one called a live ball. And as you can imagine, a dead ball would not travel very far, whereas a live ball would just get hit for miles and miles. And both of those reacted differently when hit off the bat. Well, what could happen is the home team got to choose what type of ball they wanted to use in any given game. And so the visiting team had the disadvantage when they came not knowing what type of ball was going to be in the game for the entirety of it. And the home team would say, if the visitors had a lot of sluggers on the team, we're going to use a dead ball so that their ball doesn't travel nearly as far. Whereas if they knew they could really rack up a lot of home runs against the visiting team, they would use a live ball to kind of aid them in their goal of getting more balls out of the park. So what ended up happening is the MLB, like they always do, instituted more rules. They said, that's enough of this unfairness. We're going to institute a rule of this is how the ball is made, and this is the standard across all the teams in the division. And so what that ball is something similar to what we see today, and it is three parts. The center is a rubber-wrapped cork core that is what we call the juice of the baseball. It's what gives it the elasticity off the bat. It makes it fly. The layer outside of that is tightly wrapped yarn, and the purpose of that is to keep the shape of the baseball as it's hit and thrown and things like that. And then the last aspect is the outside, the leather, which wraps all of that, holds it all together, and is stitched together with red thread so that it gives it the distinctive baseball look. And these three parts are the key components of what makes up a baseball. So how does this relate to email marketing? I'm sure you're wondering. Well, just like the baseball has three parts, the core, the center part, and then the outside, your email program should have the same. So what we're going to talk through today is what are those three main components of your email program and how to make sure that you're not pitching dead balls and that your email campaign is a very live thing. So the core, the email purpose, the yarn, subscriber expectations, and then leather, which is what I like to call the flashy stuff. So jumping into this, the core, setting that clear purpose with your subscribers. So I had the privilege and opportunity to take the Alt MBA with Seth Godin, who will be here later today giving an awesome talk, which will probably be way better than mine. However, he taught me to ask this question all the time: what is it for? So if you're not defining, if the core of your email program isn't answering the question, what is it for, there's a likelihood that you're going to have a dead email program. So what exactly does this question look like? Well, when you answer the question, I want my audience to blank, you start to define for yourselves what the whole purpose of your email program is. So for example, I want my audience to buy more stuff. That could be your what is it for. Potentially it was, I want my audience to experience more brand feels. It's kind of a weak what is it for, but it's something. At least you're having some sort of hypothesis. For myself, I send out a lot of different email programs. And one of them is a project I'm working on with my wife. And over the year, we're sending an email 3 times a week to subscribers that is exactly 100 words long. And the purpose of our email program is that we want our audience to engage in a conversation. We realize that Facebook and Twitter are somewhat places to have a conversation, but it's so full of noise that it's hard to cut through and have real meaningful conversations. And so we started this email to have conversations with friends, with people we don't know, and we send this out 3 times a week. So we want to engage in a conversation, and the way that we do that is, this is an example of one of our emails. Exactly 100 words. At the end, there's a signature, and we have this little annotation at the bottom that says, "Did you like this email?" And what people can do is they can click on this. It will open up a form where they can fill out their name, and they can write back to us and tell us what they thought. And this works really well as well if people just want to say, "Hey, I like what you said, but I have no other commentary." We can track those clicks and say, so many people liked our email on the back end in our analytics. And what actually happens is people respond. So the top 3, my mom, Kim, and Karen, have responded using that form. And then the other thing we do is we also encourage people to reply. So we have an email address set up to send both to my wife and to myself that gives us an opportunity to just hit reply back and forth to folks and have an ongoing conversation. The what is it for? Now I'm going to pause here for a minute because that's an important thing to note. If you want people to respond to your emails, don't use a do not reply at blank.com email address. It is so frustrating. I was dealing with an issue with a program I use, and I just wanted to hit reply to an email that they sent. And I wasn't paying attention. I typed up this whole email, and I hit send, and immediately it was bounced back and says, "This email inbox isn't checked. We don't check this one." And I was like, "Are you kidding me? You're sending me an email, which usually I can reply to, that usually goes to another human being so that I can get my answer to my question. But instead, I had to go to their contact form on their website, send a help support ticket just to respond to the marketing team who's not responding to those emails to get my question answered." Not a good practice. So if you're using email, I highly suggest that the return address or the sending address that you send from is actually able to be responded to. That when people hit reply, it goes to a real person and that person can respond. Okay, enough of that. So 100 words, our purpose is that others engage in our emails. The second thing that you need to realize in defining what is it for is you have to measure the right things. So when people talk about email, they always say, "Oh, my open rate is great, and my click-through rate is great, and all of these things are magic." And the problem is that those aren't the only 2 metrics that are important. If you have nothing to click on in your email, why are you tracking the click-through rate? You're going to have 0%, and you're always going to have 0%, and you're going to be like, "No one clicks on my emails." It's like, because you didn't put a link in it. So opens and clicks should be analyzed through a lens of logic as well as trends. Going back to the 100 words emails, here are the things that we measure. We measure our open rates, we measure our click-through rates on the links, but we also measure how many people replied to the email and how many people clicked and responded to the "do you like this" email button at the bottom. But what really matters, what we really care about, that goes back to our what is it for, is only these last 2 things. How many people replied to the email and how many clicks and responses. How many people are engaging in that conversation, because that's why we're sending email. It's not that the first 2 aren't important. They're just not the only metrics that we need to look at when we're looking at is this email successful. Simple is an online banking institution, and their what is it for is very different than the one I showed previously. They send out lots of different emails, and they have a mobile app, and they have an online experience, and if you're not familiar with Simple, online bank, so you don't have to have a branch. So they send out this email, and it's basically a digest of new things within their app and their online app. And they're saying, "Hey, here's some new features, go engage with them." So they're what is it for? The things that they should measure with this email are, yes, opens and clicks, but they should also be measuring how many people are now engaging with these features because we sent out an email about them. That metric is different than the metric that they would use on this email that they sent, that is basically a question and answer form with no links in it that kind of says, "Hey, how are you doing? We're transferring banks from Bancorp to BBVA, and we know there are a lot of questions. Here are commonly asked questions, and here are the answers to them. Now, what they should be measuring here is how many fewer questions are asked to their customer support team after sending out this email, because what they're doing is reducing the load on the calls and emails they should be getting around these common questions. So you see, it's not only the opens and clicks that are important, it's engagement, it's click-through rates, it's a decrease in calls. One more example, and I don't have a slide for this, is AWeber, the company I work for, we have a podcast. And what we noticed is that when we put out a podcast episode, what happens is that the majority of people have subscribed to that, whether it be on iTunes or Stitcher or different things like that. So it automatically downloads to their phone. But there's a large segment of people who haven't subscribed to our podcast that kind of go episode by episode, that go into iTunes and download it. And what we saw, both ourselves and some of our customers, is that it's not necessarily a direct correlation that you send out an email, hey, we launched a new podcast episode, that people click on the link. But on the days that that email is sent, there's a spike in downloads. So the click isn't necessarily directly correlated to the increase in downloads, but it does remind people to go to iTunes and download the latest episode. So once again, you can't trust the click-through rate alone. There are lots of other things that you have to gain data points from. So when we define what is it for, when we're focused on that core of the ball, we need to answer the question, I want my audience to blank. We need to establish a hypothesis before we send of what we want that email to do. And then we need to measure engagement, whether that be opens, clicks, responses, downloads, less questions, less traffic, things like that. The next thing we need to do is set clear expectations and send relevant messages. So this is the yarn of the ball. My brother and I, when we were younger, we would go to like Walmart and buy baseballs because they were super cheap. And what we found was after playing with them for about 10 minutes, the ball went from a perfect sphere to some sort of oblong, amorphous thing that barely could be identified as a baseball. And the reason for that is because the yarn wasn't wound tightly enough. And what happens when we don't set clear expectations is that the shape of our email program is totally thrown off. And our subscribers are like, who is this? Why are they sending me this? Why do I care? And click unsubscribe. So how can we make sure that we're sending relevant messages? Well, you start out in the very beginning before anyone signs up by telling the reader what to expect, how often to expect it, and why this is going to add value to their life. That last one is crucial because nobody wants more email in their inbox for the sake of having a full inbox. We all get enough emails as it is. So if we're not adding value to that subscriber's life in whatever capacity that might be, we're kind of doing them a disservice and not setting those clear expectations. So let's look at a couple examples of people that do this really well. There's this guy named Ben Settle. bensettle.com is his website. He's a copywriter and professional email marketer. That's a thing. And what Ben does is he sends out an email every single day. This is the sign-up form on his website. And the emails are very basic, very plain text. And on his sign-up form, he actually makes you check this box that says, I agree that when I sign up above, I will be added to a marketing mailing list where I will receive daily, in all caps, which is very important, we'll come back to that, daily email tips and promotional offers from Ben Settle. So you sign up, you click that button, you get this email. Like I said, very plain. And within the email, he says, just a reminder, this is a daily email newsletter, and I mail a lot, sometimes 2 to 3 times or more in some cases per day. Ben is setting clear expectations with his readers. He's saying, this is how much you're going to get it, this is why it's going to add value to your life, and this is what they're going to be all about. Another example of this is Fast Company. In the top right-hand corner of their website, they have a newsletter button. And when you click that button, it takes you to this page, which is an overwhelming number of newsletters that they send out. However, the advantage here is that the subscriber gets to pick and choose not only what topics they're interested in, but also the frequency of when they'll receive. So what you see here is the main Fast Company newsletter about business and innovation. You can choose whether you want to receive this daily or weekly. While as down the bottom, if you're interested in the most creative people on the weekly section, you can get news and advice for the most creative people in business. So Fast Company is saying, here's how often you're going to receive our emails. This is what our emails are going to be about. And if you're interested in this, it's going to add value to your life. So sending relevant messages, this one is kind of the most basic, the most simple. As long as we set these clear expectations before someone signs up to our list, we're going to keep the shape of our email program. People probably aren't going to unsubscribe as much because they know exactly when, how much, and what they're going to be receiving. So make sure you answer the what, how often, and why before you even start to send your first email. So we talked about the core, the what is it for. We talked about setting clear expectations. And now we're going to talk about what I think is the most exciting, the most fun stuff to talk about, seeing as I am a designer, the flashy stuff. And the flashy stuff, the leather, is our emotional connection with subscribers. So up to this point, we kind of focused on the brain side of things, the intellectual quotient, the what, the how, the data, all that kind of stuff. And now we're going to jump the chasm and talk about the heart type of things, the emotional things. And these are the things, to be honest, that really truly keep people opening our emails time and time again. So Kid & Co. is a great company. It's an Airbnb type company based out of, I believe, the UK. And what it is, it's Airbnb for parents. So if you have young children and are concerned that the Airbnb that you're going to go stay at isn't going to be suitable for children, Kid & Co. is your solution because they have homes that are fully stocked with toys that are age appropriate to your kids. So what Kid & Co. does to connect with their parents is they send out emails that are tailored to things that parents would be experiencing. So in this email, they send out which of these sounds more like you on a holiday. So being a parent myself and actually being on vacation right now, these things are really important to me. So I need to know before I go on a vacation what level of experience I'm going to need to provide for my kids. What's going to keep them busy? What's going to keep us busy? How hectic is it going to be? And so what they do is they ask a number of things. A, B, C, or D. Where do you identify? I need breakfast cooked for me daily, ideally with a large coffee and a huge buffet to choose from. Some parents, that's the best thing. Or D, we're into authentic travel. Guidebooks are not for us. We want to eat what locals eat, make friends in playgrounds, and feel like we're really living somewhere. So different parents will identify with A, B, C, or D. And what happens is when you click on this, it takes you to a page that allows you to self-select one of these great types of trips. So if you're into adventurous trips in the top right-hand corner, you would click on that and they would show you places that you can go and have off-the-grid type adventures. Or if you're on a budget, under $200 a night on the left in the middle there. And why this is important is Kid & Co. is speaking the language of the parents. They're connecting emotionally with the people that they know are their customers. And it's really important that they do that because they're not shoving stay at this place down your throat. They're saying, hey, we understand you. We're going to answer the base level questions first, and then we're going to provide you with our service, which is why you really came to our site. So the second thing that you can do to really connect emotionally with your subscribers is use personalization. Copyblogger cited a study that was done that says few things light us up quite like seeing our names in print or on the screen. And what was done is they hooked up a bunch of people to brain sensors and they gave them something to read. And the control group was given a script that used generic pronouns. And as they read it, they tracked the brain activity, and it was kind of normal across the board. But the other group that were given a script that contained their name within it, when they read their name, the brain activity in certain areas lit up. And what that showed those people is that whenever we read our names, we're inclined to kind of lean in and listen a little bit more. And so I searched and searched for emails that were doing this really well, and I couldn't find any major brands that were doing an amazing job at this. However, my colleague Tom Tate writes an email about productivity and various different topics that are interesting to him at weekly.coffee, and he uses personalization like no one else I've ever seen. This is an email he sends, once again, very plain text. And if you can see at the very bottom, my name is highlighted in orange. I'll make it bigger for you. And what's important to note here is that we see a lot of companies that are using personalization. They say, "Hi, Michael," and then they write the rest of their letter or their email. But what Tom does really well is he says, "I'm going to drop the name somewhere in the middle of the content, or in this case at the end, and I'm going to hook my reader back into and jolt them back to attention, because when they read their name, I know they're back engaged." So in this case, at the very end, he says, "I want to share the campaign with you, Michael." Now, I know Tom. He and I have discussed this tactic over and over again, and every single time he sends me an email, I think he's writing it directly to me. It is crazy how effective this is. So if you want to incorporate this into your email campaign, think about using it contextually. But one word of warning: if you're not collecting the first name on your sign-up form, don't do this. We've all seen the "hi first name" blunder, and actually we've done it before, where it really makes you kind of look foolish, and it has a complete opposite effect as to what you're trying to achieve. So test this to make sure it works. And if you don't have first names, don't do it. But if you do, it's a great tactic to use to get people back engaged. So now moving from words into images. Headspace is a meditation app, and they do a really good job engaging with their reader base. And they sent out this email. Oops, play. So if you're a target demographic for Headspace, you're probably stressed, you probably have a lot of things going on, you're probably lacking sleep, and you'll probably read this email that says, "Wake up well rested." You read that wrong. That too, but what it actually says is, "Wake up well rested." You that read wrong, that too. And so what they're doing is they're playing on your emotion, and when you finally figure out that you read the first two things wrong, you're like, "Oh crap, I need this app. I need some time, I need some headspace." And they really do a good job using a GIF in your favor. Now, once again, a word of warning: GIFs don't work in all email clients, so make sure that you think about that before you hit send. What will display is usually the first screen of the GIF, so just think about that as you're sending things out, that GIFs aren't a fail-safe. You really need to think through, like, if someone is using Outlook, what is their experience going to be like? But a really enticing way to grab readers' attention and pull them in. Speaking of GIFs, we did some testing at AWeber because we hear all the time, "Oh man, GIFs are great, we love GIFs." And we wanted to see, like, how do people really respond to GIFs? And so our customer solutions team won an award for Best Customer Support Team. And we wanted to thank our customer base for voting for us and for ranking us that way. And so what we did is we sent out 2 emails, a split test. One of them had this GIF in it, and the other of them had the same image. It was just static. And we wanted to know, how did people feel after receiving the static image versus the animated GIF? And we did that. We gauged that and measured that by that little box down the bottom. What did you think of this email? And all people had to do was click on the smiley face or the frowny face. And when they clicked on that, we were given the data. All right, people like this or they didn't like this. And what we found was fascinating. So what you see here is the control, the static image, had a click-through rate of 1.53%, and the variation 1.48. So more people actually clicked on the static image. But what was fascinating, and what our hypothesis was, is that more people would click on the happy in the GIF, and less people would click on this ad, and it was proven to be true. So 2.75% of folks clicked on the happy face and the animated GIF versus 2.09, which is a almost 32% lift. And what we proved to ourselves is that GIFs have the potential to affect emotion. Now, we've since tested other types of GIFs in our emails, and none of them have performed as well as this one did, because this one was directly tied to just adding delight to our customers' experience. So GIFs are a great tool to use if they're used meaningfully and well. So Headspace did a great job doing it, and in this case, measuring sentiment was also seen to be very successful. So when we're emotionally connecting with our subscribers, we need to use language that speaks to our audience, just like Kid & Co did, and just like adding personalization does. And then also we can add in images and GIFs very purposefully so that our readers feel something as we write to them and speak to them. So email. My perspective of email is that it's very important. It's something that cannot be ignored. However, so many people are getting it wrong. They're killing email. They're pitching dead balls to their subscribers because they're just not defining what is it for. And they're not setting those clear expectations with the folks before ever hitting send. And they're just not making any emotional connection with their subscribers. There's no reason for subscribers to stay on that email list and continue to receive email from them. So when you do all these three things, we take this sentiment that email marketing is dead, and we move it back to a place where email marketing is effective in creating connections. So I just want to leave you with this, that email is all about connection. We're humans sending emails to other humans that like to read and respond and interact with us. So next time, before you ever hit send for any of your campaigns, think about this. Email is about connection. Thanks for listening. If you want a link to the slides before Digital Summit sends them all out, you can tweet me at EmmySmithDesign, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have after the talk. But I appreciate the time here, and have a good rest of the day.